Good morning. We are here to talk about Puerto Rico this morning on a number of fronts. First, let me introduce who we have with us here today. To my left is the Budget Director for the State of New York, Robert Mihika, who is also Puerto Rican, has been very helpful in directing our efforts vis-a-vis Puerto Rico. We have Rosanna Rosado, who's the Secretary of State. Pleased to be joined with legendary Congresswoman Nydia Velazquez and legendary Congressman Jose Serrano. We have my colleague from Albany, Assemblymember Marcus Crespo. I hope he's not missing any votes, and I hope he doesn't blame it on me. If he does, we have Edwin Melendez, who is the Executive Director of the Center for Puerto Rican Studies at Hunter College. Gary LaBarbera, who's the President of the Building and Construction Trades Council of Greater New York. Lou Coletti, who's the President of the Building Trades Employers Association. And we have other members of our committee who are here today. There are a number of issues with Puerto Rico, as everybody knows. Hurricane Maria hit on September 20th. That is 211 days ago. As everybody knows, there was another power outage yesterday, which was caused by a contractor error. But the underlying cause was the inadequacy of the reconstruction of the power grid 211 days later. The fragility of the grid is the problem, and the lack of adequate resources and energy and effort in quickly and fully rebuilding the grid is the problem. Now, in general, when Hurricane Maria first hit, New York State responded quickly and strongly. And I'm very proud of the people of this state. Congresswoman Velazquez, Assemblyman Crespo, myself, and a delegation were literally the first people on the ground in Puerto Rico after the hurricane. And we can tell you firsthand how inadequate the federal response was, even on day one. What's most annoying is the inadequacy of the response was not just a 1, 2, 3 short term. Here on day 211, the federal government is still inadequate in their response. New York did everything it could short term, immediately in the aftermath, to provide help. We had hundreds and hundreds of National Guard, state police, healthcare professionals. We organized all sectors. Jill Ferrillo from the nurses is here today. Nurses sent down people. 1199 sent down healthcare workers. Our hospitals sent down doctors. We sent down contractors. We sent down supplies. We had donations from New Yorkers across the state that amounted to millions of dollars in food and supplies that were collected and sent. We had not-for-profits that raised money to actually transport the goods. The outpouring of support was magnificent, and it was heartwarming. And I can't tell you how appreciative the people of Puerto Rico have been. I hear it all day long. People come up because they knew that in a moment of need, the people of New York really stepped up, as is our way. Now, yesterday there was another power outage. It affected the entire island. Again, it was caused by the fragility of the system and the lack of serious reconstruction since the initial hurricane, where one contractor's error can put out an entire system for the island, means the system is not rebuilt to the adequate capacity. The power is starting to come back on. We had 2 people on the ground yesterday. We have been a partner with Puerto Rico in the reconstruction of the power grid. Our power agency is called NYPA, New York Power Authority, They are one of the best in the United States of America. They have been constantly engaged with Puerto Rico. They were on the ground on day one. Today we're sending down 10 of our best NYPA professionals to troubleshoot the problem and to find out how we can come up with redundancy and resiliency in the system, because a contractor is going to make a mistake. All due respect to the contractors. I know. As long as it wasn't one of yours, Lou. But even in New York, there have been rare occasions where non-members of Lou Coletti's group have made mistakes. So that is to be expected. You can't have a system that is so fragile that one contractor error with one piece of equipment knocks out the entire system. And it's not a comment on the error, it's a comment on the system. So 10 people will go down today as part of that emergency response to yesterday's situation. And we thank the NYPA people who are going down. Second, the federal government had granted temporary assistance, temporary short-term shelter aid for families who were displaced. Many of those families went to Florida. Many of those families have been in New York. And the governor of Puerto Rico yesterday asked for an extension of that temporary housing aid. Obviously, these families are not in a position to return to Puerto Rico now. They're certainly not in a position to respond to go back to Puerto Rico after what we just saw yesterday. So we need the temporary shelter allowance extended. And we're sending a letter to President Trump today asking him and FEMA to extend that temporary shelter allowance program so families can stay in New York, they can stay in Florida. That extension would take us to the end of June, and then in June those families can reassess. Third, New York is going to be organizing a long-term reconstruction effort. And we call that Puerto Rico, New York stands with Puerto Rico Rebuilding and Reconstruction. Congresswoman Velazquez, Congressman Serrano, and Assemblyman Crespo will be co-chairs of that effort, along with our Secretary of State, Rossana Rosado, and our Budget Director. This is something that we've never done before. This is going to be a long-term partnership to work on rebuilding individual homes and light infrastructure, utilizing contractors from New York, building trades professionals from New York, represented by Gary LaBarbera and Lou Coletti, and enabled by hundreds of SUNY and CUNY students who will go down for either 2 weeks or 4 weeks. They will receive credit for their time, their service at Puerto Rico. They will be in courses and training and education that is related to the reconstruction of housing and infrastructure, and aided with the professionals provided by Lou Coletti and Gary LaBarbera. We also have not-for-profits that are going to be providing funds for the supplies. So we want Puerto Rico to know we weren't just there short-term. We understand this is a long-term problem. You have many rural communities that are still in desperate need of help, and we will be providing that help, that person power, literally, with hundreds of students and building trades professionals and contractors and supplies. The main effort will begin in June, but we will spend the summer helping people rebuild their own homes, especially in the more rural parts of the community. That is going to start with an assessment team that is going to go to Puerto Rico on April 29th. Gary LaBarbera, Lou Coletti. I'm going to join that assessment team. We want to find out exactly what parts of the island need the most help. We want to team up with not-for-profits who are on the island and partner with them to develop their capacity and deploy our capacity through the not-for-profits that are on the island. In general, what we are really seeing is just an inadequate response from the federal government. They were inadequate on day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, and it is inadequate on day 211. I don't just say this as a New Yorker. I'm a former federal employee. I worked at Housing and Urban Development. I was the secretary of HUD, which did the disaster relief. I had to testify before Congresswoman Nydia Velazquez a number of times, and I can tell you she asked me very tough questions. She did not give me any break because I'm was a New Yorker. But I did disaster assistance. I did it all across this country. I did it in Haiti. I did it in the Dominican Republic. I did it in Puerto Rico. I was sent to Puerto Rico to do disaster assistance with the father of this governor, the first Governor Rosselló. So I know what this country can do when it wants to help in disaster assistance and recovery. And I can tell you, we are not doing what we have done in the past. This effort is not of the same magnitude and commitment of what this country has done in the past. And to me, it's a national disgrace. It is a national disgrace. You're talking about Puerto Rico. These are American citizens. And people forget that. And they're not second-class American citizens. There is no such thing as a second-class American citizen. We are all American citizens. And the way they're treating the people of Puerto Rico is a disgrace. I'm ashamed of it. There's also a related issue, which is the acceleration of this administration's deportations through ICE and their hyper-aggressive law enforcement tactics to find quote-unquote undocumented people and deport them. Now, they will say, the administration, well, these are dangerous people, these are criminals. That's not the truth. Some of them are, some of them aren't. And ICE's tactics, to me, are unconscionable. They use a very wide net. They bang on a door. They grab whoever they can grab. They did it again just the other day, 225 deportations. And these are people who are on American soil. And these are people who deserve a defense. It can't be that ICE shows up, ICE makes the determination, and they rip you away from your family and your children, etc., without any defense whatsoever for the people who are being deported. Now, I'm proud in this state we started a legal defense fund for immigrants, and it's run by the Secretary of State, Rossana Rosado. We put an additional $10 million in the budget to fund those programs. We're going to expedite that $10 million. I met with Secretary of State Rossana Rosado this morning. She's going to partner with legal defense professionals, the Northern Manhattan Immigration Coalition, Vera Institute. But before anyone gets deported, they should have the right to a lawyer, so their rights are adequately defended. It can't be that ICE shows up, grabs them, throws them in a car, and the next thing they know, they're on a plane going back to a country before any of their rights have been discussed. I think the disregard for the people of Puerto Rico is part of this anti-immigrant mentality that we're getting from the federal government. What it leaves out is the people of Puerto Rico are American citizens. But I think they paint with a very wide brush, and the disrespect for the Puerto Rican citizens is part of the same brush that has this hyper-enforcement by ICE, deporting everybody they can get their hands on who they believe are undocumented. As ashamed as I am of this country, is as proud as I am of New York. I'm proud of the way we showed up on day one for Puerto Rico. I'm proud of this long-term reconstruction effort. I'm proud of how the people of New York have come together for the people of Puerto Rico. And I'm proud of our stand defending immigration. This is one of the most hypocritical positions this country has ever taken. For President Trump and his administration to now take the position that they are anti-immigration is the height of hypocrisy. Because let's be honest, unless they are a member of the Navajo, Sioux, Apache, or Iroquois, unless you're a Native American, we're all immigrants. Well, they are undocumented. I am an Italian American. I'm the grandson of poor Italian American immigrants who came to this country. Do you know what they called Italians in a derogatory term in the early days? They called Italian immigrants WAPs. You know what WAP stood for? Without papers. When an Italian came to Ellis Island and they weren't, quote unquote, documented, they put WOP, without papers. And for decades, the derogatory term for early Italian immigrants was, you're a WAP, you're without papers. The new fancy word for that is undocumented. I am the grandson of undocumented immigrants who gave birth to a son named Mario Cuomo, who wound up doing beautiful service for this state and for this country. And I am the grandson of those undocumented immigrants who's dedicated his life to public service. Our stance on immigration makes no sense. It defies our history. It defies our values. It is divisive, and it injects a cancer in the body politic, trying to divide us as a people. Our founding fathers used one expression over and over and over, and that was e pluribus unum, out of many one, because they knew this country was founded by bringing people from different places. And they knew the challenge for this country was to take all those different immigrants and forge one community. That was e pluribus unum. If the president turns around and looks at the flag behind the president's desk, on that flag it says e pluribus unum. He should look at that flag, and he should take it more seriously and understand what made America America. And what they're doing is the exact opposite. Curse the darkness, light the candle. We will oppose what this federal government is doing with all our might. We will light a candle at the same time. And the candle is the candle of love for the people of Puerto Rico, the candle of love for the concept of accepting immigrants that made America America and made New York New York. With that, let me turn it over to Robert Mihika, who will give you some more information on the reconstruction, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you, Governor. Today, New Yorkers are once again coming together to support our brothers and sisters in need. Since Hurricanes Maria and Irma struck, it has been truly inspiring to see the response from Governor Cuomo and New Yorkers from across the state. As a New Yorker of Puerto Rican descent with family still there, I am especially grateful for the way our state has stepped up to the plate and for the people of Puerto Rico. Under the leadership of Governor Cuomo, we have come together to deliver the assistance, support, advocacy that they need to rebuild. The deployments the governor just announced will provide for immediate relief for the people of Puerto Rico, but there is far more work to be done in Puerto Rico to rebuild for the long term. As we saw earlier this week, and the governor mentioned, the infrastructure on the island still remains fragile. And New York isn't going anywhere. In March, we launched the New York Stands with Puerto Rico Recovery and Rebuilding Initiative to help address the island's housing crisis and to rebuild Puerto Rico better and stronger than before. Today, in addition to the power grid experts that are presently en route to Puerto Rico, we are also announcing that we will deploy a tactical assessment team to Puerto Rico to develop rebuilding roadmaps for communities in need as part of this initiative. We will officially launch this effort in Puerto Rico on April 29th. Then, once the roadmaps are completed in June, we will mobilize volunteer teams on the ground. These teams will consist of SUNY and CUNY students and skilled workers from the construction and building trades to work side by side with our non-for-profit partners on the ground. These skilled tradesmen and women will be guiding the way, establishing boot camps to train local workers. Students will also be helping to enhance Puerto Rico's rebuilding capacity by mucking and gutting and rebuilding homes, remediating mold, repairing and strapping roofs. Roughly 500 SUNY and CUNY students will deploy in June, and they will also receive credit for their work there. So today, while the federal government abdicates its responsibility, Governor Cuomo and our partners in New York are stepping up for Puerto Rico. And to make it very clear, New York State still stands with Puerto Rico. Governor Cuomo is creating a formal committee to help coordinate and advance our various efforts to help Puerto Rico build back better than before. This committee will include a wide array of stakeholders, including leaders from New York's business communities, organized labor, and not-for-profits. As the governor mentioned, it's going to be co-chaired by Congresswoman Nydia Velazquez, Congressman Jose Serrano Sr., Assemblyman Marcos Crespo, and our own Secretary of State, Rosanna Rosado. We thank them for their leadership and support. The members will also include the folks up here with me today, and also Hector Figueroa, President of 32BJ, Jose Calderon, President of the Hispanic Federation, Dr. Javidan Rodriguez, President of Albany University, Jill Ferrillo, Executive Director of the New York State Nurses Association, Victor Martinez of Diaspora X, Marlene Cintron, President of the Bronx Overall Development Corporation, Dr. Felix Matos Rodriguez, President of Queens College, Ken Rasky of Greater New York Hospital Association, B. Grouse, President of Haney's, and Hilda Escher, President of Ibero-American Action League, and the other partners from across New York who have been instrumental in our efforts to support Puerto Rico. We look forward to their guidance and their recommendations. It is now my pleasure to introduce Congresswoman Nydia Velazquez.
Thank you, and good morning. Thank you, Governor, for one more time showing the people of Puerto Rico, American citizens, that they are not alone. And thank you so much for demonstrating that New Yorkers stand with their friends and their neighbors. There is, especially traditionally, historically, relationship between Puerto Rico and New York. And so we know who our friends are when you are facing crisis, when you are being devastated by a natural disaster. So I come from Yabucoa, the daughter of a sugarcane worker, 9 children. Yabucoa, my hometown, where Hurricane Maria made landfall. 7 months later, today, Yabucoa has no power. Yes, Governor, me too. I am ashamed of this administration. Mr. President, you have abdicated your solemn duty of showing up when American citizens are facing a natural disaster. Imagine, I ask you, imagine for one moment what it means for the people of Puerto Rico to be without power for 36 hours. 36 hours. Imagine if someone needs to be hooked up to a medical machine. People are facing today life or death because of the inadequacy of the response of the President of the United States. Governor, I am just grateful because not only did you call me the day after Maria to say, we got a plane, we're going to go to Puerto Rico. But immediately, you were making phone calls to airlines executives, asking for them to help transport manpower, food, water, equipment, medicine. And you have been there consistently. I was planning to go to Puerto Rico tomorrow. I'm working with retired veterans, asking them to come to Velazquez to help put roof for 300 families. This is 2 months before the next hurricane season is going to be here. Can you imagine the emotional toll that is taking to the children in Puerto Rico, to the families in Puerto Rico, the American people? I know that they know that this is totally unfair, that the treatment that American citizens in Puerto Rico, those who shed blood to defend this country, they deserve better. Governor, you have been there, and I know that the state of New York faced winter storm, and yet people, lines workers, energy workers, electrical workers, they were in Puerto Rico, and they're still there. And now you are announcing this new program. Shame on us, because if we allow for this type of treatment to continue, what message are we sending to our own people here in this country? The fact of the matter is, Mr. President, you have a big mouth when you want to show the power and the fury. Show it to the people of Puerto Rico that are suffering. Thank you, Mr. Governor.
Beautiful. That was beautiful. That was beautiful. Beautiful. Congressman Serrano?
Thank you, Governor, and thank you for bringing us together, and good morning to all. Thank you all for joining us today. Governor, if you forgive me, I'm going to divert a second because you mentioned a key word and how it affects Puerto Rico, and that's immigration. And Nydia and I are leading an effort in Congress to try to stop. I'm the top Democrat on the committee that funds the census, to stop this question about citizenship. But let me tell you what the second question is. Everybody is concerned and focused on, are you a citizen? A question that should not be asked in the census, because the Constitution says count the people. It doesn't say count the citizens. It doesn't say count the undocumented. It says count the people. But there's a second question that very few people know exists. The second question is, are you a citizen, born in the United States, and you check that or you don't check it, and then it says born in Puerto Rico, Guam, the Virgin Islands, all the territories. Now, why in heck would you single out people born in the territories when you don't ask people if they were born in Texas or in California or in Hawaii or in Alaska, unless you want to divide people, so that people can say, you see those 10 million? They weren't born in the United States. Well, technically they were. I remember the World Baseball Classic where these high-paid announcers with college degrees said, and the Americans could win this game. And I said, don't let anybody that the Puerto Rico team is playing the USA team and they're all Americans, but that's what we live to. But Governor, Over the last 6 months, we have seen the true spirit of New Yorkers and the strength of ties between New York and Puerto Rico. I came to New York when I was in my 8th year of life, and that's a long time ago. It's rained a lot since then, especially last weekend. And I always knew there was a special bond between New York and Puerto Rico, but I've never seen it like I've seen it now. And you've been at the top of that. New York does stand with Puerto Rico in a special way. Call it the sixth borough, call it whatever you want to call it, but it is part of New York, and New York is the capital of Puerto Rico, I believe, in so many ways. Under Governor Cuomo's leadership, New York's organizations and people from all walks of life and all backgrounds and all across the state have stepped up to the plate and lent a helping hand. And today we're again coming together as our state deploys a team of utility experts to aid the people of Puerto Rico during this crisis. And I'm proud to stand with Governor Cuomo to support the people of Puerto Rico. And I join you also in calling out the president, as Nydia has done. I mean, the president says to us, Puerto Rico is an island surrounded by water. It's not that easy to reach. Well, thank you, Governor, for reminding me that an island is usually surrounded by water. I mean, President, I've forgotten that. Then he says, you can't drive a truck up there. It's not that easy to get there. Well, hell, you did it in 1898 with much less military equipment. You can do it now if you wanted to, but he didn't want to. Governor Cuomo has been a leader in supporting, and the message is clear in Puerto Rico. People that I speak to on a daily basis, reporters who call me, they know the part that New York has played, because Nydia will tell you there's probably very few people in Puerto Rico living right now, or people who moved out of Puerto Rico recently, who haven't spent some time in New York, and vice versa. It's almost hard to find. I've never been to New York. It's almost hard to find, you know. Your leadership continues to support recovery efforts and advocate for more assistance. And as we can see from the latest tragedy, Puerto Rico's challenges are far from over. I want to thank you, Governor Cuomo. I want to thank you as a Puerto Rican. I want to thank you as a New Yorker, as a New Yorker. I want to thank you as a member of Congress. You've been a champion, and this is not a political statement. You've done the right thing, and we will not forget. We will never forget. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And now it's my honor to introduce the gentleman who protects my petitions to get on the ballot in the Bronx. Hey, I got to be nice to my county leader, Assemblyman Marcos Crespo.
Thank you, Congressman. I'm sure that had nothing to do with those kind of words. But look, this is for many of us beyond just politically something important to do because we represent Puerto Ricans, because we hail from Puerto Rico. For many of us, it's very, very personal. As a Congresswoman said, and this holds true for most of us at this table, our family members are there. Many of you have heard me talk about my mom's experience. She's in Arroyo. I just finally got a hold of her this morning. Her town had power finally restored, although it comes in and out. But we couldn't talk yesterday. I had no idea what was going on when the outage occurred. And so many families are going through the same thing. But two things have to be highlighted. Number one, we are not here now because a storm hit. The president continues to fail, and the governor wants to step in and get attention. Let me be very clear about something. The governor and I went to Puerto Rico several years ago and talked about Puerto Rico's needs before there was a hurricane, before the economic crisis, and we talked about what could we do for Puerto Rico. And the governor had an idea, and we worked together, and an office opened up in Puerto Rico that was helping New York businesses, particularly our farmers, be able to enter the Puerto Rico market. Matter of fact, Puerto Rico started buying apples from New York and not from other states because of that partnership. Vice versa, Puerto Rico businesses entered the New York market, helping them create jobs and expand. Then, when the economic crisis hit, we went to Puerto Rico with the governor. Not just him, a team of experts to talk about how can we advocate and help Puerto Rico's economy. When the healthcare crisis hit, we were there with the Medicaid team talking about how can New York system help Puerto Rico. This is well before we had a hurricane that devastated the island. And then I joined the governor and the Congresswoman and others in Puerto Rico the day after the storm. As a Puerto Rican, to see that firsthand, not only to be able to represent my colleagues and those that would have loved to be there as well, but to see firsthand where the place that I was born in looked like after such a devastating event. To see the suffering, to see people standing on the side of the road with their suitcases wondering where to go. The fact that the governor of the state of New York, his entire team, agency heads and personnel were there on the ground the day after, and the president took 3 weeks to get there. Think about what that says to the American community, to American citizens, to the people in Puerto Rico, about where they stand in our nation's, status. When you're right, Governor, there is no such thing as a second-class citizen, except that in practice, there are those in this country, including this president, including his administration, who have demonstrated that they do see a second-class status. Matter of fact, the way things have gone, it's a third-class status. Because the people in New Orleans, for example, when they had their problems, and families by the thousands were displaced, the federal government was able to give them a more secure temporary shelter assistance, one that allowed them to really find some stability through that process. What are Puerto Rican families being given? A voucher, a payment to a hotel. And by the way, they're not comfortable in a hotel. Let me tell you what the real story is. Families with children with special needs stuck in a hotel with a manager saying, don't step out of your room. You're not welcome to be in the lobby. You can't use the amenities. Only one of you gets breakfast in the morning. You're not a regular customer. They can't cook. There's no kitchen in a hotel. How do you feed your children with a microwave? You might do that for a day with some Chef Boyardee. You can't do that every day. That is what is happening for months at a time. And now the federal government says, that's over too. It's not a shame on this nation. It is a disgrace. It is the worst of us. And if that is the kind of executive leadership we have in Washington, well, I thank God that we have executive leadership in this state who has demonstrated a commitment to Puerto Rico, to every corner of the state, to acknowledge that relationship, to acknowledge that brother, to do something real. I ain't going to preach, but the people, the Israelites were not told, sit at the beach and just pray and everything will be done. No, they were marched. They were ordered to march. And somebody was given the ability to part that sea and help people walk. It was an action required to find that salvation. Well, you know what? I kind of see that here, where so many people could do more. But thank God we have somebody who is helping us do that. New Yorkers came out by the thousands to want to give back to the people of Puerto Rico. It's very easy to donate. The hard part was, how do you get those hundreds of thousands of pounds of supplies to the island? And there was no easy answer for that. The governor had an answer. The governor used his relations. The governor used his resources. And we mobilized that assistance through the Empire State Relief and Recovery effort. So if there's one thing I would ever say to President Trump, it's, you're an embarrassment to the office. And if you continue to operate this way, you will have generations of American citizens who will always talk about you, and this will be your legacy. One where you turned your backs on those that needed you the most, that have American citizenship, who depended on you as a president, who could not vote for you, even if they wanted to, because that's the kind of second-class status that we continue to have. But to the people of New York, thank you for what you've done, and to the governor, thank you, because you have demonstrated what executive leadership needs to be, and you've done it for the people of New York, and you have now done it for the people of Puerto Rico. And this continuation of that effort is a game changer, because there are families right now sitting in their homes that have no roofs, that still need repairs, who didn't have insurance, who FEMA doesn't want to help. If instead of a grant, they're giving them a loan, they can't repay that, and so they're still sitting under poorly constructed tarps, if they even have that. And another storm is coming. So the workers that are going down, the labor unions and others who are going to mobilize those students, they're going to make a life-changing difference in American citizens' lives. I could only wish and pray that the president understood it was his responsibility to do it. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you. I thank all the representatives. Clearly, this is a matter of passion, and it is personal. We've been to Puerto Rico. We've seen the suffering. For those members who have family there, they've been hearing about it every day. So the feelings run very deep on this, as they should. I also say to the people of Puerto Rico, they have to separate the actions of this administration from the feelings of the American people.
Right.
The American people are a loving, giving, compassionate people. And this is not the feelings of the people of this country. It's the actions of this administration. And there's a very big difference between the two. The Puerto Rican community has been very important to New York. It's been very important to America. And American citizens respect that and appreciate it. Questions?
You mentioned the rebuilding efforts by CUNY and SUNY students. I'm curious, is that open just to undergrads? And how, you mentioned academic credit, I think. How would that work?
No, that is open to, first, it is a collaboration between not-for-profit organizations here and in Puerto Rico, professional builders and tradespeople, represented by Lou Coletti and Gary LaBarbera, and volunteers who will work hand in hand with those skilled tradesmen. The core of the volunteers will come from SUNY and CUNY students who will receive credit, be organized through SUNY and CUNY. But other people who would like to volunteer, especially if they have skills in this area, we would love to have them join us. People who would like to donate funds to support the effort, because a lot of this is purchasing supplies, etc., we also encourage that. We'll bring you down with us, Zach. I think you, for half a day effort, I think you'd be in for it.
Governor, all the trips that you've made down to Puerto Rico and all the work that you've done, have you gotten any kind of, I don't know, flap from FEMA, from the White House, from them saying, no, this is our area of responsibility, New York needs to stay out of it, you need to stay out of it? Have you gotten anything like that at all?
No, I wish I did. I wish we had the federal government calling up saying, don't worry, we have this covered. No, not at all.
So, Governor, who are you coordinating with in Puerto Rico, and how are you coordinating your NYPA people with what's going on there, and then how are you working with FEMA, or are you?
The NYPA people, the NYPA professionals work with PREPA, which is the Puerto Rican Power Agency. That has been going on since the day of the hurricane. And we have had a continued presence, and that relationship works very well. It's well-oiled. They know each other. We're sending down a tactical team today of 10 additional people to work through redundancy and resiliency issues. In other words, you can't have one cable that is providing the power, which happened in this case, and that cable is severed. So that's the power relationship. On the rebuilding reconstruction, we're working with island-based not-for-profits. We're obviously working with the government. We do not interface with the federal government on this effort. It's an effort separate and apart from anything the federal government is doing or not doing.
Governor, will you promise any organization that supports the Working Families Party that they will not be punished?
The Working Families issue is an issue between the groups in the Working Families Party and the labor unions. And as the labor unions have said multiple times, the Working Families people are delusional if they think anyone is going to tell the unions who to support and not support. It's totally up to the unions.
But what about the question, will you promise not to punish them? Did you tell them that they should lose your number?
Yeah, I'm not going to punish. It has nothing to do with me. You know, punishment is for God. Who the union should support or not support, that's up to the unions. Nobody's going to tell them what to do.
One more question.
Sure. Did you tell them that they should lose your number if they support the Working Families Party?
No, the unions will support. Ask the unions what they said in response to that. The teachers' union said they're delusional. Nobody will tell the unions who to support and not support, and they'll do what they see fit.
Puerto Rico, if you don't mind, Governor, the vouchers that a lot of people who have come here from Puerto Rico are using expire on Saturday. I know you're writing a letter to the federal government. Is there anything that New York can do for these people who may find themselves homeless for a second time this year because they may be thrown out of their hotel rooms?
Well, again, it shows the lack of empathy and the lack of ideas from this administration. When in New Orleans they faced Katrina, and they went through the same experience, and they found a lot of people that didn't have a title, couldn't prove that they lived where they were living. They just expanded the program and allowed for the people to use it. Why can't they do that with American citizens? How could the federal government expect, given what we saw yesterday, how vulnerable and the fragility of the power grid in Puerto Rico, that they're going to send them back? We're not going to allow for that to happen. Congressman Serrano and their appropriators and myself, we sent a letter with a lot of the members requesting for them and demanding that this program be expanded, and it will be, the more time will be given.
Let's do questions on Puerto Rico because the representatives have to leave.
Governor, is there any state aid that can be brought to bear to help these people?
You know, Marcia, it's a good question. We have not even looked at it. It would be a nightmare if the federal government does not renew this temporary shelter allowance. And I can't imagine that they wouldn't, especially after what just happened. I mean, the Congresswoman said it perfectly. How can you expect these families to go back to Puerto Rico now?
There's a lot of pressure, Governor, from members of Congress, not just the ones that are at this table, for this not to happen. Because as you said, let us not judge the American people by the Trump administration. So there are a lot of members of Congress who are not Puerto Rican, obviously, and in fact who are from the other party too, in this case, who are on board with keeping the vouchers in place.
No, this is a humanitarian crisis. This is not about politics.
Governor, since it's always a political season, but it's a re-election here, everybody knows about the campaign. What happens, I've asked you about this, the total amount that New York State is willing to spend, what it spends so far, can you give us an idea? And also for the Congress members, I know that there's allocations in the billions, I think it's $18 billion that was just allocated to Puerto Rico. How do we match this up? Does New York State get reimbursed? I'm getting into the weeds. I know we're not concerned about that, but at some point it's all going to come up. I just want to get an idea where this is going. Does New York State get reimbursed?
Yes, we get reimbursed by the federal government through the mutual aid system, they call it. So when we provide assistance, we provide aid, we get reimbursed through the federal government for the cost of that aid.
For everything that's spent, or is it partial?
It's full reimbursement.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We don't get reimbursed for the reporters that go down. I would advocate a new program, the reporter reimbursement program, and I would select a few reporters who can go to Puerto Rico and actually do the coverage. You and Zach, I think, should do a 3-year study of the recovery effort.
Make the Road New York and other small groups that endorse somebody other than you, but who receive state funding. Can you assure them that their state funding will
Yeah, that has nothing to do with it. The bulk of the funding comes from labor unions. The relationship is between the labor unions and those groups, and whatever the labor unions decide to do with the groups, they will. I stand with labor in the dispute. My position is very clear. Mario Cuomo became governor because of the labor movement. The labor movement built the middle class in this state and this nation. The labor movement has been the engine of progressive change. We wouldn't have gotten $15 minimum wage passed without the labor unions, paid family leave, raised the age, marriage equality. The labor movement is the engine for progressive change. I wouldn't be governor without the labor movement. They represent the middle class. I am a middle class guy from Queens. This is not a phony Queens accent. This is a born and raised Queens accent. They represent the carpenters and the plumbers and the hotel workers and the healthcare workers and the nurses. And that's where I am, where I came from. That's who I represent, and I will stand with them to my last day in office.
Why shouldn't you play hardball politics? If some of these groups are endorsing your opponent, why shouldn't you
But
play
that's
hardball?
politics. That's what they always do.
Why shouldn't you say, you're not going to get my phone call back? I mean, that's to be expected, isn't it?
Well, there's a difference between politics and government, and that's not how I play it.
Thank you, guys.
Yes.
Do you support the state parole board's decision to release Herman Bell? I know that there's a TRO right now. The judge is looking at it to determine whether or not all of the laws were followed. What's your position on that?
If I were on the parole board, I would not have made that decision. The parole board is an independent board, but I would not have made that decision.
Governor, what do you say to those who say with your policies, you've been kind of tacking left since your opponent got into the race?
Yeah, I say, look at what I have done all my life. Look at what I did with Mario Cuomo when we took a position against the death penalty every year at a tremendous political cost. Look at what I did at HUD when I was with President Clinton, and we went all over the country building an agenda for poor people and sued the Ku Klux Klan. Look at what I did when I was the first big state in the United States to pass marriage equality, when it couldn't be done, when I passed $15 minimum wage, when we passed paid family leave, when I closed more prisons than any governor in the history of the state of the nation. So look at a lifetime of work, my friend. I've been doing the same thing since I entered public service. When I was in my 20s, I was doing homeless housing in Brooklyn, building homeless housing for homeless families and people with AIDS and victims of domestic violence. So I'm a very simple, consistent fellow. And we got into this business because my father taught me that the Democratic Party at its best was a vehicle for social justice and social change, and that's what I've been doing since day one. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.